Death by Scrabble, written by Io Moore.
It was a cold, wet night. The kind of weather perfect for two, as they say. The cool air smelled so sweet and filled every corner of our house, naturally air-conditioning it. But instead of cuddling and snuggling, my wife and I were planning to end our marriage. We had finally come to terms that it wasn't working. It never had. And the only way we could have peace was if one of us was dead. We had been married for only 2 years, but we fought like lifelong enemies. But the way we fought, you would never believe we were once crazy about each other. I still remember a time when we were inseparable. All of a sudden, nothing she did could satisfy me, and I became no longer good enough for her. But all that was going to end tonight. We had nothing to lose. Our marriage produced no children, and our parents had long passed on, so there was no one nagging us about grandchildren. We were jobless and didn't have friends. Being broke has a way of revealing your true friends, and for us, there were none. So we decided to end it all with a game of Scrabble, the only thing we still enjoyed doing together. But this was no ordinary game. We were playing till death did us part. The knife was shining. Sterling silver it was. You could see it reflecting the living room light as it waited patiently for blood. My doomed wife placed it on the floor beside the Scrabble board, packed her hair into a ponytail, and we started playing. The rules were simple. Think of any part of your opponent's body you like to use the knife on. Spell it on the Scrabble board, then have your way with the knife. All I needed was just one word, throat, and that would be the end of all my problems. But it wasn't going to be that easy, cause she was a very good player. My first word was horrible. Start. It got me 20 points, but who cares about points in this kind of game? Quickly, she capitalized on the letter S and formed slap. And before I could blink, a huge force crashed into my cheek. A firm backhand that put stars in my eyes. I quickly comforted my face with my hand, rubbing the sore spot. There was a strange wetness. I looked at my hand and saw blood. Her ring had torn a jagged hole in my skin. My eyes swam. And we were just starting. I summoned my English vocabulary and was able to match some letters together. I got lucky with the word thigh. I saw the terror in her eyes as I picked up the knife. I hesitated for a second. Then, thoughts of freedom from this bondage called marriage flooded my mind, and I plunged the knife into her thigh. She screamed louder than a woman in labor as her blood splattered all over my face and the Scrabble board. I dragged the knife through her thigh just to see what would happen. She let loose another scream that went deep into my heart. It terrified me and I stopped, leaving the knife in her thigh. She was in pain, so much pain. She looked at me, shaking and gasping for air, and in spite of the puddle of tears in her eyes, she began arranging her letters. And then she found her revenge. She formed finger. With all her energy, she pulled the knife out of her thigh, screaming like a mad woman, and looked straight into my eyes. I shivered in fear. Those eyes called for blood. Mine. I tried to act tough, but the thought of my finger being chopped off numbed me. I placed my hand on the ground. My eyes motioned to her to take whichever finger she wanted. She didn't think twice. She took my fourth finger, my ring finger, and began cutting it like a meat seller cutting a stubborn piece of meat. The pain shot through my brain. I screamed like it was my nuts being chopped off. Pain fired up my entire arm as she slowly severed the finger, and amidst the blood splattering all over, something flew out. I saw it lying on the floor. It was my ring. I looked at my hand to see what was left of my finger. I couldn't believe what was happening. I realized what a terrible idea this game was as I looked at my letters and couldn't find anything worth playing. I felt that would give me some time to rest and nuss my hand, but I was terrified she would play a more lethal word, and she did. There was no mercy in her demeanor as she placed her towels on the board shoulder. I started crying, begging her to stop, to let us end this game before it went out of hand, but she moved closer to me, her blood trailing all over the floor. Then with both hands, she drove the knife into my shoulder. I felt the cold metal blade drive itself through my shoulder. I could feel it in my entire arm. So much pain I almost choked as I screamed. She pulled out the knife slowly, causing more damage to my shoulder as the knife came out. Blood followed, gushing like water from a high-pressure pipe. I started wondering how much more blood I would have to lose before I died. The next round was useless for both of us, but a fresh deal gave me letters M, O, and H. Adding to the S and other letters I had gave me stomach. Despite losing so much blood and at the risk of dying, my eyes brightened. She looked at me with puppy eyes, same eyes that made me fall in love with her. I remember the first time we met, how beautiful she was. I quickly snapped out of it. This wasn't time to reminisce. I took the knife from the floor where she had dropped it and plunged it into her stomach. I drove the knife deeper and twisted it inside her and watched blood gush out of her mouth. This is it, I thought. There was no way she was going to survive that. As I watched her face turn pale, sadness filled my heart. I was sure she was dead, but like always, she surprised me. She adjusted herself and faced her letters. This bitch wasn't going down easily. She stared long and hard at her letters, and within seconds, I saw a spark in her eyes. Slowly, with a smile on her face, she played her word, wrist. I died inside. As I thought the worst had happened, she added another S to the word. I was definitely dead. She made her way slowly to me, almost slipping in her own blood. She took my left hand, I couldn't even move it, and started slitting my wrist. At this point, I was beyond pain. She moved to the second hand and began working the knife through it. I felt my essence flowing out, my spirit gradually leaving me. It was over. As I lay there almost lifeless, my eyes strayed towards the Scrabble board, which was now soaked in blood. I looked at my letters, and suddenly, the word I had been looking for all day jumped at me. Throat. I looked at my wife. Her eyes had followed mine to my letters. She saw the letters and began panicking, trying to scramble away. I tried to reach for the letters, but my hands failed me. I tried to reach the knife, but my sight started to go dim. Then I heard something, like a phone ringing. A phone? From where? It got louder and louder, and then I jumped up. I saw myself lying on the couch in my living room, shirt soaked in sweat. It was a dream. I had been dreaming all along. My heart was pounding uncontrollably, almost in sync with the phone ringing in my pocket. I silenced the device without even looking at it and exhaled in relief. I was so happy it wasn't real. But as I sat up on the couch, I felt someone watching me. I turned to look over the back of the couch, and there she was. My wife. My bloody wife. She was in front of a dining table slicing a loaf of bread. The knife shined brightly as she placed it on the table. It looked so familiar. Of course it was. It was the knife in my dreams, the one we used to play the Scrabble game. Was that a sign? What did it mean? My wife glanced at me and looked away indifferently. I felt nothing but hate for her. I sat up properly, and as I caught my breath, she sat opposite me and asked, "Do you want to play Scrabble?"
About 6 out of 10 marriages fail every year. Unfortunately, these marriages could have been saved with some form of therapy. No marriage should get to the state portrayed in this story. If you're experiencing problems in your marriage, do consider speaking to a qualified marriage counselor or therapist.
Death by Scrabble, written by Moore, inspired by Charlie Fish. It was voiced by Femi Bakes, mixed by Obiora Ohazarume, and it's been a More audio production.